Okay. Good. And then stream key, get that all set and get it down. Is it minimized now or?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Spokane City Council Committee meeting for Public Infrastructure, Environment, and Sustainability. And I'd like to turn the meeting over to Assistant Chair, Councilmember Michael Cathcart.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Mumm. So we'll kick off our meeting here. Is there anything, I think there's 2 items on our consent agenda. Is there anything that anybody wants to pull off and have a further conversation about? I think I can see everybody. I don't see anything. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from July?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh. Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the minutes from July 26. All those in favor say aye.
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 And those opposed? Okay, that motion carries. I think what we'll do is we'll skip to the staff requests and get those taken care of first. I know we've got Marlene here and I see Inga's on the line as well. So the first one is the updated developer agreement with the Falls. And Marlene, do you want to discuss that?
Sure, thank you, Councilmember. Excuse me, a little frog in my throat. So what we're looking at here is an updated developer agreement. We have some other things that we had already planned to do with the Falls, which is the tower that's going to be built at the corner of Broadway and Lincoln, where the former YWCA site was. We are adding $200,000 for their sewer work. That will put the sewer into the public right-of-way along Lincoln, which really will help development all along Lincoln, rather than a different option that they could have explored on their own private property adjacent to the river. So with the additional funding that we're providing, we're going to get that sewer located where we can get the greater benefit from an economic development standpoint. As you know, most of the parcels along Lincoln on the west side are parking lots, primarily dirt parking lots. So there's opportunity there for redevelopment that this sewer connection will help facilitate.
Marlene, other than just the fact that the builder's obviously already in the ground, is there a cost savings on top of that by having them do the work?
Well, potentially, but with the developer agreement, they'll still have to go through a bidding process and so forth to meet our standards. So, but they may be working with, different contractors that may be more appealing to private development than city development.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Is there any questions for Marlene? I don't see any. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Marlene.
Sure.
And we'll move on to the Complete Streets Grant Program. Inga, are you available to discuss?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Take it away.
Okay. So we have the opportunity right now to apply for a Complete Streets Grant, and this is a program that goes through TIB, but only cities that have adopted a complete street ordinance are eligible to apply, which we have. And you have to be nominated by one of their partner agencies, which the ones that we've been talking to are Department of Commerce, the Spokane Regional Health District, or the Cascade Bicycle Club. And each of these groups will have a slightly different focus on what elements of complete streets they want to push for, and which applications they want to nominate. So we're still kind of evaluating which one we should work with. But what we're looking at doing is submitting for $1 million program grant to install more rapid flash beacons at crosswalks throughout the city. We get a number of these requests from neighborhoods and from schools and just citizens walking around. And we fund quite a few of them through the traffic calming program, but there's quite a few more out there where we'd really like to be able to upgrade the crosswalks. So there's no local match on them, and applications are due sometime in October, depending on which agency we partner with. So I want to show you the locations that we're looking at. One thing to note is that we don't necessarily have to finalize all of the locations before we turn this in. I'm looking at developing kind of a priority list and submitting that. That'll probably result in a dollar figure that's a little higher than $1 million. And then once we get a little, once they've notified us as to how much we've received, or if we've received it, then we'll figure out exactly which ones to do. But this is a preliminary map that I've put together, and this is based on just requests that we've had from the neighborhoods, locations that I think are high risk for collisions due to the either pedestrian or vehicular volume. Also vehicular speeds are a factor, and number of lanes, whether they're crossing 4 lanes or 3 lanes of traffic. So I flagged some of these just because of the risk. Also looked at locations with collision history, because we do have a few of those. And then also proximity to pedestrian generating buildings, looking at whether they're on our bike routes and transit stops. And in doing that, I'm talking to STA about the ridership at each of these locations. Another element that they're looking for in some of these applications is equity. And so we're taking a look at what neighborhoods and what the population is like as we go through this list. So we'll probably have a finalized list towards the end of September before we turn the application in. And
Inga, the red dot on North Foothills, is that the Greenway?
no, it is not. That is one that's been requested several times by the neighborhood. It's in front of the grocery store, the Yolks there. And STA is looking at modifying one of the routes that runs in the Northeast District and putting a stop right there. And so that's why we're considering that one.
Okay. I guess there's been a lot of talk about that Cincinnati Greenway and how folks would cross there at Foothills. Has that been something that you've thought about?
It actually already has rapid flash beacons.
Does it?
Yep.
Oh, well, then I guess I'm a little behind. So, all right. Well, thank you. Is there any other questions? I see Councilman Mumm.
Thank you. Real quick on the Northwest one, is that at the entrance to the new school over there? Is that what that's being requested for?
I believe that one is the entrance into the park and the sports complex. So we've looked at doing one at Rowan, but then there's also a bus stop. I want to say it's Sampson, like another block to the south. So still kind of trying to figure out the best location, but I've had requests for that one for a while.
The reason I bring it up is there was some preliminary study of possible roundabouts along there because of the change in traffic patterns. I don't know. I would love to know kind of what our plan was for that before we commit. I love these programs, though.
So the roundabout is in our impact fee program for the intersection of Wellesley and Assembly. But this location could also serve students who are walking from that neighborhood to the new middle school, and this would be the population that might choose the route that kind of goes the back way through the park and through where Joe Abbey Stadium is right now to get through the school.
We need pedestrian
Councilman Stratton.
enhancements all along there, so I'm glad you're looking at all the alternatives. Thank you.
Hey, Inga, if we have a thought or an idea, can we send those to you?
Yeah.
Just maybe suggestions?
Mhm.
There might be one that I would like to forward just to have it looked at.
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yep, that's fine. We're still trying to evaluate all the ones we should consider.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions for Inga? Inga, my last question, is this limited to those like flash beacons or some sort of a pedestrian bicycle crossing, or are there other options that could be explored?
There are other options. In the past, we used some of the money to contribute to the U District Bridge, I think was the one, because we were eligible for this, I want to say in 2016.
Yeah, it was actually for the plaza.
And I think we used it for that. But this is,
Okay.
this is something that I've seen where we have a little bit of a funding gap for, and I thought it might be a nice way to get these improvements put in place.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'm not seeing, unless I'm missing somebody, I don't see any other hands up. Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much, Inga, for the presentation there. We'll move on to Kevin with the Illinois Avenue discussion.
Yes, good afternoon. Let me share my screen here. Okay, you should be seeing my screen now. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to take this opportunity to update City Council on Illinois Avenue Protected Bike Lane project that we've been doing some planning work on and are in the midst of. So first, just kind of a quick overview of what I'll talk about here. We'll kind of discuss a little bit of the background overview of the project in general, and we'll review the various options that we've come up with throughout the corridor, as well as the survey results, and also share some of the feedback we've had in the public meeting to date, and then talk next steps. So in terms of background, again, as you're all probably aware, City Council passed a resolution in June of 2020 requesting the addition of a protected bike lane project along Illinois Avenue from Hamilton to Market Street up in District 1. Around similar time or simultaneously, the street department had a planned grind and overlay project for the eastern segment of Illinois from Perry to Market Street, starting in 2021 and to be completed over a couple of phases over several years. So ICM, as a result of that council resolution, we started a study process earlier this year internally with staff from ICM, myself, Inga, as well as other support staff, and Colin Quinhurst from planning as well has been heavily involved and instrumental in this work as well. We had a workshop with the Bicycle Advisory Board, more informal presentation, kind of sharing some initial concepts that we had developed, got some feedback there. We held our first public meeting in June, and throughout June and around early June, the project website went live along with the story map. We had a survey that was conducted throughout June and is now closed. And then we tentatively have planned a second public meeting for late September 2021. And then finally, before I kind of get into the actual concepts and alternatives, just want to plant this seed of this idea of near-term versus long-term improvements. That's pretty important, especially for the eastern segment where there's the planned grind and overlay work that we asked the street department to hold off on while we conducted this planning study. So I'm going to jump between a couple different documents here. So first, before I look at show you the concepts, just want to share that we do have, just kind of give you a quick bird's eye view. As I mentioned in June, we did launch the project website that exists on our site today. There's some graphics there. There's a link to the actual story map, which is here, which has a lot of graphics, which I'll go through here shortly. But in the interest of time and just kind of consolidating the discussion, I felt it was best to utilize the survey results to kind of speak from today. So first, just to kind of start things off, this is a long segment of Illinois. And just to clarify, the original resolution mentioned Hamilton to Market. We expanded one block west to Cincinnati to tie into the Cincinnati Greenway as a logical termini there. And given the different character of different segments of Illinois, different existing site conditions, different development around the corridor, we decided to break up our work into really three different segments. The first segment, or the west segment here in blue, a smaller central segment centered around Perry Street and Perry Place, and then the large eastern segment, more or less east of Perry, excuse me. And we have different options within each of these segments. I do want to focus most of my discussion today on the east segment, so I'll kind of move through the west and central segment a little bit faster, but there's a lot more to kind of talk about in the east segment. So first, towards the westerly end, the existing conditions out there today is roughly a 44-foot curb-to-curb width of the existing street. We developed three different options for this segment. So the first option narrowed the road by reconstructing the existing frontages in order to provide additional space behind the curb for what we're just calling a shared path, a 10-foot path of both bike and pedestrian accommodation. Option two is similar to option one. It further narrows the street down to 36 feet in order to provide a wider space for, again, a shared bike and pedestrian walkway. And in both these options, we're trying to stay within the existing available right-of-way through there. And then the third option we developed, a sort of an imbalance option, if you will. We eliminated parking on one side of the street in order to provide in-street bike lane on one side and some shared bike ped facilities on the other. This, of course, could be flopped. The same improvements could occur on the opposite sides of the street if desired. So in terms of our survey results for this segment, our survey is pretty simple. We're really just asking for the public's feedback and their perception or their preferred option. And within this first segment, the option two was the clearly preferred option. I'll go back up just to kind of remind what that is. Again, it's a shared use path, both accommodating both bike and pedestrians. It's a little bit wider than the option one that was provided. So then moving into what we're calling the central segment, or segment two. If you've driven this area, it's kind of unique. The two Perry Street intersections with Illinois, there's a signal at one of them, kind of unique lane configuration at the other that's unsignalized. We developed two options through here in order to accommodate bicycles better. So the first option, again, the existing condition today, you can see from this graphic, there's 3 travel lanes, 48 foot of curb-to-curb width. There is some limited parking that occurs along the southerly side of the roadway. So the two options we developed, one, in order to create the space for the bike facilities, we eliminated one of the westbound lanes in order to create space for buffered bike lanes through here. Parking would be maintained. That's option one. Now, option two, we're able to maintain the 3 travel lanes that exist today, eliminate parking on the south side. Again, I mentioned earlier, the parking's a pretty limited stretch. There's only 1 or 2 properties, along that frontage. And by doing so, that accommodates the bike lanes with the buffering. In terms of the, I didn't mention on the first segment, but in terms of the buffering, what that looks like, that treatment or that protected bike lane can look like, have a couple of different treatments. It could be striping with what we call delineators. Those are the kind of the plastic pipes that are glued or embedded in the ground. Or it could be a more physical barrier in terms of raised curb. So there's multiple options there. There was not a lot of, in our public meeting discussion, including with BAB, there wasn't a strong preference for that treatment in terms of striping the delineators versus curbing. But that's something we'll continue to explore and maybe ask the public more pointedly in the next public meeting in terms of a preference there, if that's an option we land on. So the survey results for this central segment were pretty overwhelming for option two, which again is the option that maintains the 3 travel lanes as more or less as they exist today. with the protected bike lanes in the street, and the parking's eliminated on that south side. So then moving into the easterly segment, or segment 3. This area both has more opportunities, but that also means there's lots of different options we can come up with that are viable. And through our early discussions, particularly with the BAB, one interesting thing that came to the surface is things kind of evolved. Of course, from the council resolution, our initial work, the focus was on, different protected bike lane treatments. From the early discussions, it became clear that there was some interest in this segment of seeing some sort of a more shared use facility through this area. And we ended up developing 6 different options for this segment. So first, in terms of the existing conditions, what's out there today, you have a 48-foot available street width from curb to curb. Generally a single lane in each direction with just the regular or standard striped bike lanes. Parking on each side today, parking on the east side doesn't get much use because there's not much developed land. It's mainly the bluff along that easterly segment. Parking on the northerly side of the street definitely does get used for the existing residences that are there. So our first couple options we developed through here were more focused on that protected bike lane approach or treatment. So the first option narrows the lanes, eliminates the parking along the southerly side or bluff side of the roadway. And that extra width allows us to widen the bike lanes and install buffers. Again, that buffer treatment could be either striping and delineators or raised curbing. In segment 2, the main difference between 2 and 1 is that we simply flip the location of the parking and the bikes so that the parking is located between the bike lane and the vehicular lane, and that provides further separation for the bicyclist, a little more protection for them as a rider. And moving into option 3, this is where some of our more shared use facilities start to come into the picture. In this case, we eliminate the 2 bike lanes, but we use that same curb to curb width that we have without doing any physical widening. And we utilize some of that paved width that we have out there today along the bluff side to include a shared use facility both for bikes and peds, and then protect and separate them with a raised median between the travel lane and that shared use facility. Again, in this concept, you heard me mention the need for the grind and overlay project that's out there. This would be a project that it could theoretically be implemented with the grind and overlay. We would still do a grind and overlay. The primary additional improvement would be just this curbing to separate the shared use facility from the travel lanes. And of course, some reconfiguration of the striping that's relatively easy to do by virtue of the fact we're doing a grind and overlay anyhow. So moving down to option 4, actually, let me go back to 3 and just emphasize as well, one of the opportunities and values of this improvement is doesn't affect drainage in any way. We're not tearing out the existing roadway. Aside from this raised median that we'll put on top of the existing pavement, there's no additional curbing and some of that more expensive type work. As we go into option 4, we're still utilizing the curb to curb width that's out there today, but along that southerly side, we're replacing that shared facility that's down kind of on that existing street pavement and that raised median by really removing and excavating that area and installing more of the traditional elevated shared use path, which requires new curbing, which requires demolition and removal of some of the existing pavement section, and requires a relocation of some of the drainage systems since the curbing is relocated. And that project as well, this option as well, would be contained within the existing curbing. Option 5 was an option that added the bike lanes, but also added a pedestrian facility along the southerly curb line, along the curb. It's an option that some folks requested we look at. And then finally, option 6 was another shared use path type option. How this option is different than option 4 is that it maintains a westbound bike lane. That way, those westbound bicyclists don't have to cross the roadway to get to the shared use path. They still have that lane available to them. challenge with this is it'd be a much more costly option in that we'd have to extend our improvements beyond the existing curb on the bluff side that exists today. That starts to get costly in certain stretches of here, particularly around Crestline, where there's pretty steep slope and drop off. So we're looking at retaining walls and additional improvements and costs there to accommodate an option like this. Excuse me. So in terms of our survey results, we looked at this segment slightly different, but just given the total number of options was so great here. We asked the public to rank their options through here and did a scoring process by more points, of course, for first place and then on down. And based on that scoring, the top 3 options all were options that included some sort of shared use path type facility. And the most popular option was option 3, which is more of a two-way protected path, we're calling it, or facility. So I'll go back up and just kind of reiterate what that option 3 was that was sort of identified as the preferred option. Again, this option utilizes that existing curb-to-curb space. We install a raised median to kind of protect the bikes and peds and separate them from through the travel lane. And it's a project that would be a small increase in terms of scope beyond what we would have to do for a grind and overlay project out there. And again, the second and third preferred options were option 4, that was second most preference, and then option number 6 was the third most preferred option.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Question for you. So 3 and 4 are definitely kind of how I've pictured it in my head. But what I'm wondering is that buffer, regardless of the option, could that buffer be kind of could it be a greenery type buffer? Could you have grass? Could you have street trees? Could you have a separator like that to really kind of give just this kind of nicer feel to that neighborhood there?
Are you referring to option 3 or option 4?
Any of the options, really, just where you have that buffer, that separator. Could that separator be something that's more like that greenery type feel?
Sure. Option 4, I think definitely that's a viable option. This is kind of our standard kind of separated width. For option 3, I don't think that's viable. It's a little bit too narrow to put landscaping in there and have it be viable landscaping. So I think you'd really need something along the lines of the option 4. Not to mention with option 3, I think this is envisioned as, sort of the low-hanging fruit option of something that we could get implemented with the grind and overlay project. And once you start introducing landscaping, now you're looking at actually excavating out the pavement, of course, to plant the trees. You need irrigation of the trees. Now your costs would start going up under this type of an option. But certainly, as I mentioned, option 4 is certainly viable to do what you're suggesting, as well as option 6 as well.
Yeah, I bring this up just because Councilwoman Burke has mentioned this before, but I think we're both in agreement that this kind of area in Northeast Spokane is kind of tantamount to our version of High Drive. And you think about just the feel that you have when you drive, High Drive, and it's green, it's lush, it just has that feel to it, that richness. And I just think that would be a really nice improvement if there's some way to figure out a method to that madness for Northeast to improve that. But just throwing that out there as an idea, because I think it would be really helpful.
Sure. No, it's an interesting point. Don't recall necessarily if that came up in our public meeting. I guess in just an observation I would share with that is the fact that today you have a pretty nice vista for all those homes looking out over the bluff to the south that's unobstructed. And one downside of trees is now all of a sudden your view gets a little bit obstructed. So I don't know what the feeling would be, folks that actually live there versus maybe the folks that don't live there but maybe use the facility, you're sort of those kind of pros and cons.
That's fair. And you'd want that feedback from the folks that live on that corridor for sure. Councilwoman Mom, I saw your hand up.
Sure, thanks. I just want to share with you that this is one of the older streets in our community because in the 1960s, the main sidewalk shoveler was me. I made a lot of money going up and down, getting nickels and dimes and quarters, and I can tell you that that sidewalk is obviously too close to the road. So I'm super excited that this is coming through. It took us 50 years plus. But I do want to support the two-way cycle track ideas, and I'm glad the community also supports that. I think we've seen this in other communities. It really encourages families to use it, and it's a much more, a wider shared use pathway that gets used by more of the community. But I did have a couple things I wanted to comment on, and one of it is snow maintenance. Because it's a shared use pathway, those homeowners, often who are elderly, who hire little kids like me at the time to shovel, are they going to be required to shovel a 7-foot wide sidewalk essentially to keep it clear? Or how do we maintain that roadway? That's my first connection or question. My second one is on the demarcation issue. I just want to give you feedback. We tried this out with a shared use pathway up on 5 Mile, and immediately cars were driving on it. And especially when it snows, they can't maybe see the signage or demarcation, and without that very high raised buffer or median, they seem to think it's part of the roadway. So we did have to make some amendments to that up on 5 Mile, I think you're aware of. But when you have that kind of a new lane or shifting it, it can be quite confusing for some folks. So just from a safety perspective. And then thirdly, really support the idea of street trees. And I understand the view corridor, but we've worked with homeowners before on view corridors because you can place them sort of on the lot line and it's not such a big deal. But it seems to me this beautiful vista, which I've walked many times, is quite hot in the summer. And it would be nice for the pedestrians even to put the trees on the right-of-way to the south. So, and maybe on the north side too. So in terms of our complete streets, I know this is a little different configuration, Kevin, but maybe we could address looking at installing some kind of street trees or encouraging the neighborhood to help put those in just so we can have a little bit of shade. Thank you.
Sure. Just to address a couple of those questions, I think on the maintenance side, I think particularly for the cycle track type option and displayed area with option 3, or in the other segments, the central segment where it's more of a protected bike facility, protected with delineators or a raised median, I think it's certainly a growing occurrence, if you will, as we install more of these in the city, including the upcoming ones along Riverside. That maintenance issue and topic, it's definitely top of our mind and it's been talked about some internally. And I think it's just reality is that we're going to, kind of have to come up with some new approaches to making sure we're, appropriately maintaining some of these areas. In terms of the safety issue, certainly I think that's why we, with this option 3, are strongly proposing a raised median. In this particular case, we would not look at the cycle track without the raised median. This would not be a situation where we'd be okay with just the striping and delineators because of that wide pavement width that you're referring to. It kind of be confusing in terms of whether it's a travel lane or not. So that'd be the objective of that raised median, is to positively separate the travel lanes versus kind of this two-way cycle track or shared facility. So that's a segue to want to get back.
Real
Street
quick,
trees.
Can we have a couple more questions?
Yeah, just,
I'm sorry.
and
Sorry.
street trees, is that something you could look at, please?
Well, I think that comes down to the near term versus long term, perspective in my view. Again, we're looking at, we need to do a grind and overlay out there sooner than later. Pavement condition is not in great shape. Those of you who drive it know that. If we wait too long to find the funds or pursue grant dollars to do the more robust project, when I'm going to get to costs here in a second, the more robust projects would be projects like option 4 or option 6. We don't want to wait until that point in time, sometime down the road, to do the pavement maintenance work because it could be too far gone by then. So regardless, we really do need to get on the grind and overlay work. We are starting as soon as possible. So that's where we really view this option 3 as a good near-term option that does not preclude future improvements along the lines of an option 4 with a buffer, when that's, probably your best opportunity to add some landscaping and street trees as an example.
Like a phased concept.
Yep. So that's a good segue back to what I also wanted to share.
Can we still have a couple more questions on this point? I just want to make sure.
I can't
While they're
see who
fresh.
has hands up who's looking.
I'm gonna go to Council President Beggs and then Councilman Kinnear after.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, I think Councilmember Mumm was talking about not putting street trees in the street, but putting it to the south, which again takes more money and can be phased. But I think that's the idea. The other thing I was just going to respond, they do have snow clearing machines for these shared use paths. And as we do more, I'm assuming we're just going to have to invest in that and do that. But the thing that I wanted to confirm was, it sounds like the option 3 is, I think you're going to tell us this in a minute, is going to be the cheapest and the easiest to get done in the near future, which I know is going to do that. So I just wanted to vote my approval for that. But Councilmember Kinnear also has her hand up.
So I'm going to echo what both my seatmates said about street trees. Number one, we could plant them so that they would not obstruct views. We have trees all along the bluff, along High Drive, and people do not complain. They get the views still because they're fairly sparse until you go further down the hill. And those can be done right away. We have a 40% canopy cover goal, and the only way we're going to get there is to start planting more trees. So that should be a priority for this corridor, and we can get the money to do that. We have the Lands Council that has been planting trees all over, and this could certainly be a site for them to do so coming up this spring. So I would encourage you to make that a priority because it's wonderful space to be able to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so that's a good segue. I just wanted to share sort of the deltas and costs. With option 3, what I've displaying here is what's the extra cost above and beyond just doing the plain traditional grind and overlay work that needs to occur out there. So that option 3 is kind of utilizing that existing pavement and adding just the raised curb to separate the travelway from that shared use facility. It's only an extra cost of around $170,000. It's mainly that curbing cost. When we go down to option 4 and 6, those become much more expensive option. Option 4, because we're really excavating and completely rebuilding that southerly frontage, if you will, to make it a more traditional shared use separated facility. And then option 6, because we have to go down the slopes and construct some retaining walls, that gets much more expensive, about $2.1 million. I should emphasize, and I mentioned earlier, this is a really long stretch of road. This is over a mile long. So this is kind of one of the reasons why when we start deviating from on our typical section, the costs start adding up quick, just because of that sheer length of the roadway. So again, this is why we were looking at option 3 as something that's more doable for us to implement with the grind and overlay project here sooner than later. I would view the other options as more longer term options where we have to go out and look for grant dollars in order to fund them. Now, in terms of the trees and landscaping, that I have not included those in those estimates, so that'd be some additional costs. As Councilmember Kinnear alluded to, we can look at other options, including the Lands Council as mentioned, and see if there's an opportunity to get those installed in the short term as well. That also leads me to another topic that kind of came out within the first public meeting, and that's the idea of not just a desire for the shared use path along the bluff, but also some overlook areas or some plaza areas. And I do want to highlight that there are some opportunities that we've observed, a couple different locations, more at the westerly and easterly end of the segment. And just to orient you, this picture zoomed in from Perry Street to Market Street on the far east, Crestline in the center, labeled Cook Street, which is an identified greenway as well. The center section is not a good opportunity for any kind of plazas or anything extra beyond the curb. It's an area where it gets closer to the railroad and the slopes are really steep. But there are some flatter areas or zones on either end, and these are kind of snapshots below that show those two areas where there could be some opportunities for a plaza. Again, if that's a desire of the council to get something like that installed in the short term, and we want to include it, say with a grind and overlay project, the idea that came to mind from our end is looking at traffic calming dollars potentially. My understanding is Zynga is looking at Cycle 10 projects as we speak. So timing-wise, that may be something that maybe should be considered, or we want to consider if we want to get some plazas installed, with a nearer-term project starting next year.
Kevin, I think the plazas are a great idea. Do you know what they add in cost to the project?
I knew someone was going to ask that. It depends. It depends a lot on exactly how much you put into them. If you really want to focus on the primary need, which is some paved space and benches, that's going to be on the lower end. You're probably looking at $75,000 to $100,000 for two of them. Including an ADA ramp that's accessible to them, and there's a little bit extra that goes into it, a little bit of grading work, erosion control, and such. If you're expecting a more architectural treatment in terms of colored architectural concrete, basalt pillars, more elaborate landscaping with irrigation, you can imagine those costs, start to rise pretty quick, because now you're looking at installing irrigation service, which don't exist today. So now you're tearing into the road and trenching for that. So it could be a wide range. What I quoted earlier, that kind of that lower cost would be for, sort of just a straightforward kind of plaza or overlook areas.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Kevin on the Illinois project? Councilman Mumm.
I'm trying to remember, Kevin, and I don't know if you've seen it on a map, but do you know if Hamilton and Illinois
We can't hear you, Councilman.
I guess I had it on the whole time. There you go. I'm wondering if you happen to see on the map, I think it's possible the Hamilton corridor extends up to Illinois. Do you know where it ends, maybe council members? The reason I ask that is if that's the case, corridors have a lot of pedestrian enhancement requirements when we do projects like this for really great pedestrian crossovers and painted crosswalks and that sort of thing. So that intersection at Hamilton and Illinois, if you guys remember where the donut parade is, that's going to be quite a crossover coming off of Cincinnati, right, Kevin?
Yeah, this stretch here is really just the eastern segment from Perry to Market, because that's where the planned grind and overlay work is. I think the area you're referring to is more that westerly segment.
Section. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we view that more as the longer term, improvements down the road.
But I'm just saying that we have a requirement within our centers and corridors that when we do these kinds of improvements, to do a full-blown pedestrian center or corridor crossover walk, really, really, especially if there's a bike lane coming over, a lot of extra enhancements there. And just wanted to point that out. I had forgotten to do that. So I couldn't recall, but I think it's pretty close to the end of the corridor. Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Okay, anything else? Not seeing any hands up. Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. Really appreciate the presentation. I know there's some neighborhood folks watching, really excited to see this project moving along.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll move into council requests, and I thought we would just dip down and hit number 5 and let Jeff Teal talk to us about the SEPTED landscape improvements at the Intermodal Center.
Good afternoon. So this was the SEPTED project for the Intermodal. We had an engineer study done, and what we originally thought we could do, we found out we could not do it because it's pinning onto the railroad overpass there. So with this new proposed work scope is to actually do some more excavating, removing 2 trees, building a retaining wall with a railing on the top that's just adjacent to the overpass bridge. So there was a vault that was there, and that vault will need to be lowered as well.
Okay, any questions for Jeff? Councilwoman Kinnear?
Thanks. When we first discussed this, Council President Beggs and I went down there, talked with Lutheran Community Services, yada, yada. Fast forward, the shrubs, the rocks, that corner was the problem because it provided hiding places right at that bus stop. So it created some angst for the people who are waiting at the bus stop. So what I'm hearing you say is this project has increased in scope. So it's not just about removing the shrubs and cleaning up the site. It's much more. And so I'm wondering why that changed so drastically.
There's a structural failure in the wall, and so this just allows us to expand the project so that way it will remove occupants from that space, heading more to the south. All of your shrubs are still going to be removed. The retaining wall, the section that we're going to have to leave, will be pointed so that way we don't have a place for people to sit. And that is the reason why it expanded, is because we couldn't remove that whole wall like we thought we could. So in order for it to look decent and achieve what we're trying to achieve, it needed to expand more to the south.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions, follow-ups? Not seeing any hands up. Jeff, thank you very much for the update on that.
Thank you.
And why don't we move then to number two? We'll start at the top. Eric, can you give us the legislative update on public works projects?
Thank you and good afternoon. Yeah, so this is really a call for public works projects. Just by way of overview, August is when we begin planning for the state legislative session that begins in January. And as a reminder, the legislature runs in two-year cycles. 2022 coming up is the second year of this biennium. They've already passed the state budget for 21-22, but they will pass a smaller supplemental budget early in the new year with many opportunities to secure funding for public works and various community projects. So department heads and community partners, now is the time to identify your funding needs and let the council and our city lobbyists know what your priorities are so we can help you. And I wanted to just show a couple of quick slides about what the capital budget funds, because this is really the primary method for securing dollars for public works projects. Bear with me. Okay, so this is an overview of the kinds of things that we pursue in the capital budget, and of course these items are usually championed by our state legislators. Our third legislative district has done an incredible job advocating for Spokane, but we've also relied on legislators outside the third. For example, in the 6th legislative district, this past session, Councilwoman Mumm worked with Senator Jeff Foley on some funding for a art project in her district. And that's the kind of partnership we really seek and we encourage you to think about as you're thinking about how state capital budget funds could help you. Trying to move on to the next.
Eric, can I also
screen
chip
here.
in? Can I also chip in?
Yes,
They
please.
also funded park design for Meadow Glen Park, and that's something to think about. Is when we're looking for park funds, they are sometimes able to advocate within their district and help out with that.
Awesome. Yep, that's super helpful. So it's it's not just building new buildings, but also as bullets say here, planning and design, landscaping, infrastructure, just about anything you can think of. And just wanted to give you a couple examples here so you can see the size of projects that are typically funded. Everything from a couple $1 million for community projects in Spokane were secured last session with the city's help. And going right down to the project I mentioned just a minute ago, $25,000 for a small art project in your district, Councilwoman. So, yeah, just an opportunity to think ahead about how the council can help you secure funding for public works projects. And I think, Council President, you might have had this was a quick presentation at your request as we kick off our legislative agenda process for 2022, but I think you might have had some comments to go with this.
Yeah, I just, not many. I just wanted everyone to know that this opportunity is here, but we try to get these figured out in the next really 60 days so that we can be ready to go and go to our legislators and be ready. So just encouraging the administration to be thinking and creative and think outside the box. We want to get more money for Spokane for the projects that we want, just like we were hearing about earlier in the meeting. So it's just, it seems a ways away till the legislative session, but it's not, because we want to have our agenda ready in November, and then we meet and greet with our legislators in December in writing. So now is the time to do it. So thanks, Eric.
Thank you. It's hard to keep my eyes off that baby, Councilman Cathcart. But yeah, ideally, so I'll send out an email to everyone with some with our timeline and some key dates. Really, if we could get our public works projects to our legislative team committee by October 1st, that would be great. And then that committee will vet various requests, and the council approves the state legislative agenda every year, as Council President said, in November. So there is time. Ideally, sooner the better. We've had requests for capital budget items come as late as 2 or 3 weeks before the end of the legislative session, which is always really difficult on our legislators. So the more we can plan ahead, the better we can help you.
Hey, Eric.
That's all I have. Questions?
Eric, I would just add too, if it's even possible to get stuff done earlier, the better, because, Council President mentioned meeting with legislators in December, which you can do, but, between vacations and getting ready for session, a lot of times their schedules are limited in December. And so just the earlier you can have those conversations with legislators, I think the more likely you are just to get a better response and better opportunity. So I would just throw that out there.
Great. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Eric? I don't see any. Okay. Thank you very much, Eric.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And then I think, Hannah Lee, are you giving us a quick update on the Sustainability Action Plan?
I'm going to do it, council
okay.
member, but she's going to drive some slides for me.
Perfect. I'll turn it over to you.
You could.
Yeah, so we just wanted to give people an update where we are process-wise. So as you know, this spring there's a draft sustainability plan that was created by the Sustainability Action Subcommittee. And we as council members purposely did not try to do any editorial content over their draft. So we weren't endorsing it or not endorsing it. And there's probably, I think of the 200 specific planks, there's only a handful that have gathered any kind of controversy or things like that. So most of it is pretty much people are good with. But so we've spent that time and through the end of this month doing public outreach, and they have been super, super busy going out to neighborhood council meetings, holding workshops. As you can see, 30 different workshops that 800 people attended, 20 more extended engagements. We published 83,000 utility inserts, and we have online surveys, 2,100 people, lots of media. So the word is really out there, I would say, far above, beyond average of any typical city initiative. And what's going to happen next is Kara, Odegaard, and the team are going to continue gathering. They've been gathering it, but synthesize them, and then make some more revisions based on that input. And then it'll go back to the SAS to make sure that they like the input, and it captures what the public comment was in general. And then it will come to us as a council, probably the end of September, early October, as a final for us to consider. And if necessary, we can edit anything that we need to edit. We've got 4 votes, and then enact it. And I'm super excited to do that. I think it's going to be one of the more innovative city sustainability plans in the nation. And as I'm fond of saying about Spokane products like this, I think it's kind of has a lot of Midwestern values and language in it that will be broadly appealing and can be an example for communities throughout the United States, not just on what sometimes I call the left coast. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I've been super happy that the feedback we've been getting has been so positive from so many sectors. And I think just as an editorial comment, the one thing about natural gas restrictions, I don't really expect that to be in the final plan. There will probably, whatever the amount of greenhouse gas offset that would be, we'll have to make up. But there's plenty of ways to do that. So anyway, that's just wanted to give people an update that we're going full throttle on outreach and been very successful. And a draft will be coming to us in about a little over a month. So with that, if there's any questions.
Councilwoman Kinnear?
Not a question, but I want to give thanks to Kara Odegaard and her team for all the work, because this is not an easy lift. This is a heavy lift, and they've worked diligently. So I think we have to give them a thumbs up, round of applause, and a big thank you for all the work they've done.
And let me just weigh in on that. Thank you, Councilmember Kinnear. I probably should have done more. Kara has worked around the clock on this and just taken up every challenge, and has been an amazing, she's not just a policy person, and I'm not saying that just a policy person, but she's an amazing facilitator. I watched her facilitate a meeting between Spokane 350, which is a very environmental organization, some of the labor unions that are involved in the natural gas, and Avista over an afternoon, and watch them find amazing common ground. And it was just terrific, just amazing. So very, very gifted. And she is this week in an intense practicum for her master's degree, which she's working on in that. So that's why she's not here doing it, but she's doing it all. So again, thanks and appreciation to her.
Any other questions, comments on this one? Council President, do you want to roll right into the parking kiosk update?
Sure. So this is a resolution that's out there that would set policy that we would install parking kiosks in the downtown retail core as a policy of the city. And this conversation has been going on for several years on it. I had a really good meeting with Chris Becker and Johnny Perkins today, and essentially the main request they have is for council to make a decision one way or the other. They prefer parking meters there. Their concern, as I understood it, is that it might be hard for people to adapt, and they want to put off to another day for people to adapt to kiosks. what the resolution says is that all the cities that are moving in parking right now are moving towards kiosks. This particular model would still have parking standards at every place vertically, so you'd know where to park. And as Councilmember Burke indicated, they would be available for bicycle parking, those standards, and also making it easier for those parking hoods when you got to reserve something for construction people. But it would have the same kind of decals that the current ones have, so you could pay by using your phone. You still have the option, if you really want to do coins, you can walk over to the kiosk. But the idea is to really move people to the parking application because it's so much easier for people to use. Actually, our sense who've been looking at it is our revenues would go up, our labor costs would go down, and it also, that Park by Phone app allows us to do that 15 minutes free, first 15 minutes. It allows potentially, when you put money in your parking wallet, you can get a 10% discount. It might allow different stores to pay a portion of your parking. And it might also allow the ability for people who are seniors on fixed income or other low-income people to qualify for a parking rate that's a little bit cheaper. And it would also provide for better enforcement, quicker enforcement, and get that turnover that our businesses want. So I'm supporting this resolution, and I, again, talked to Chris Becker. I said, if you want to put meters in other parts of the city, that's fine with me, but this is really the key place where we really need that rapid turnover and better service. But she said that if we would put parking kiosks here, she would just prefer that there be kiosks everywhere. So that's it. That's a tee up, but I'm willing to take any questions, concerns.
Councilwoman Stratton?
So the kiosk, there's a minimum parking, correct? They have to pay a little more. It's $1.20. Is that where that comes from?
That can, although I think that's up to us. We can adjust that. So, but yeah, that's currently. So right now that works. That's for the. That's not just for kiosks. That's for meters right now too. If you pay by phone, there is a minimum. So that doesn't matter kiosks or meters.
But if I go to town and I just want to go in and out,
you can still do that.
15 minutes, but then if I want any more than that, then I pay the.
But you can still, if you wanted to just pay by coin, you still can.
Okay.
And you don't have to do it. It's only if you use the phone app that you have that minimum charge.
And so Chris sent out the cost breakdown, I think on Friday, that Councilmember Mumm was looking for. So what is that change in that as far as costs for kiosks over, we would be buying more kiosks, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll let Councilmember Mumm speak for herself, but for myself, that really wasn't the analysis that we were looking for. That was a very quick spotlight. Like if you bought today, kiosks cost more than meters. But in terms of what we were looking for is more of a long-term. We're at the point, whatever we buy, whether we buy meters for the downtown core or kiosks, that's about a 5 to 10 year fork in the road. And so that's really my concern, that we're going to spend millions of dollars. Which direction are we going for the next 5 to 10 years? The analysis, as I read it, did not really take into account robustly what the labor costs are going to be saving over time, what the increased revenues are, what the opportunities for businesses. So that, I mean, it was an improvement over what we've had, and we've been asking, but just for myself, I didn't find it satisfying. What I would have loved to see was best case scenario for both, and then we could kind of compare, but I didn't really see it that. It seemed to be, to me, tilted in a direction. But as you know, I'm very biased about this. So.
Councilwoman Kinnear?
Okay, that's an understatement, Council President.
Yeah.
What we haven't done is we have not heard from the Parking Advisory Committee on this. Councilmember Stratton and I are on that committee, and it has not come up. So I wonder if we should, because we have a week, if we should, between now and then, just do a email ask of what's your preference and get their feedback. I feel like we're working in a vacuum here. So I'd love to get their feedback on that.
I'm up for that. I'd love to participate in the drafting of the email with you and Councilmember Stratton. And you have 2 votes to overrule me, but I would love to at least weigh in on the language of it.
I will give you a draft and then decide if we'll accept your changes.
Okay, fair enough. And I'm a former member of the PAC, so yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Do you have any other questions? Council President, I guess two things for me. One is there any reason we can't get that cost analysis? I mean, if we have the raw data and we kind of have some general knowledge of what some of these staff costs and things are, it seems like somebody should be able to put that together without too much difficulty.
I don't really think we have the raw data because they have been, in my opinion, focused narrowly on a particular thing, even though for the last 2 or 3 years we've been talking about these kiosks, but their staff really wants the other direction, I think, clearly. And they have their reasons, and they have their logic. But I don't think that data is easily available. They could tell me differently, but
I guess my other thought is if the goal is to push people to the app, and I agree, I think that's long term, the direction you want to go, and that'll reduce those operational costs. But if that's the goal, couldn't we today, say if you pay by app, we're going to reduce the fee by 25%, or pick the number as a way to try and drive more people to start paying by phone and get that moving?
Potentially, but they want to do the opposite. They want to raise the rates, not lower the rates. So, yeah.
Okay. Councilman Stratton.
By any chance, is Chris Becker in this meeting that she might want to respond?
I don't see her, no. I don't believe she is on.
Okay. I just thought we could get some answers quicker. Thanks.
Councilman Wilkerson.
Thank you. And also, I serve on the DSP board, and we really haven't weighed in on the input from downtown businesses around the whole parking conversation. So I think they'll be meeting on Thursday to get some input on how that will be affecting the participants in that organization, our downtown businesses. I think will be important to this conversation also.
That's great. That'll be really helpful to hear from them as well. Anything else on this one? No? Okay. We will move to Councilwoman Mumm, SRTC award update.
Thank you. And we have Shauna Harshman, who is our technical advisor on SRTC. And Shauna, you have an update on the projects.
Thank you, Councilmember Mumm. Unfortunately, I'm here in the office today without my video camera, and it is telling me that I cannot start my video. So I'm not going to be able to share screen for a couple of the other updates that I wanted to share with you all, but I can definitely give you the updates on the really good news on our project awards. So just to go back for a moment, Council's been working very closely with administration, staff, including ICM staff, on transportation funding both locally and at the state legislative level that you heard from Eric on. And so in this regard, a couple of recent successes to share with you all that in earlier this year, SRTC put out a call for preservation project, and very recently the city was awarded a fairly sizable amount of money on 2 of these projects. So the first project to update you on is the Maple Ash Chip Seal project. So we were awarded just over $700,000 out of the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program to do chip seal and update this road, which is very exciting. one of the other projects that we are applying for in terms of preservation is the Maple Street Bridge. So these two would work together really well. And the second award was for $1 million on the Haven Street Grind and Overlay, also from the Surface Transportation Block Grants that SRTC was able to award to us. So two big wins for us on those applications. And one thing just to note here is that as we're looking at our legislative agenda at both the state and the federal level, one of the things that we're often calling for is additional funding for maintenance and preservation, which is exactly what these awards are. And we know that we have a large backlog of transportation infrastructure maintenance, and these projects go a little ways towards helping us realize the full benefit of our transportation system. And one of the things that we often ask for is just additional funding for programs like the Surface Transportation Block Grant. So we don't always ask for specific projects, but just to ensure that these types of grants receive funding that the city can apply for. So in that regard, as you are thinking about your priorities for transportation funding as you're setting the legislative agenda, one other thing to keep in mind is that we do work with Spokane Regional Transportation Council, and we do have two of you who are currently on that board, and they actually roll up our legislative priorities into a larger list that they call the Unified List of Regional Transportation Priorities. And our priorities then are very transparent in the region and are used by organizations such as GSI, for example, to be able to advocate for a whole list of projects across the region that are coordinated. So that's really the high-level update that I have for you on SRTC. Just wanted to share our newest grant awards with you all. Small wins.
Questions for Shauna? Thank you very much, Shauna.
Welcome.
I am not seeing any hands. Okay, we will let you go, and we can move along to number 7, which I believe is our last item on our agenda, the East Central Library resolution from Councilmember Wilkerson.
Thank you, Councilmember Cathcart. So I just wanted to bring this before the council because that is going to be a very unique space in East Central. And there have been conversations about what could happen there, and the conversations have ran the gamut from cultural to medical to everything in between. Unlike Northeast Community Center and that library, there is not a united consensus of what should happen. So with that in mind, we wanted to put a placeholder on this location to make sure that there is community engagement and that the community and the citizens in East Central have a say in how that space is utilized going forward. And I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions for Councilman Wilkerson? Council President Beggs.
I don't have a question. I just have 100% support. I just really am so happy you're bringing this forward. There's so many great uses for, potentially community groups who need extra space. The MLK Center at East Central is going great guns. They got plenty of stuff going. That's great space, community space. And I really just think the community should decide what they want there. So I'm really glad they will do that, and I hope we'll get that process going sooner rather than later, so that we'll be ready to go when it's vacant. So thanks a lot.
And thank you, Council President. I do believe the library is on track, barring shelves arriving, to be opening sometime in October. So now is the time to actually get this going and not have to wait much longer. So thank you.
Councilwoman, do you have an idea of what this engagement process would look like? Is it something council would lead or some other organization might lead? Do you know how this would work in your mind?
At this point, I think it will be kind of council supported, starting with the neighborhood and the East Bragg Business District. And also there's a group of folks who have been working on the East Fifth Avenue Initiative also, and just bringing those groups together in community engagement of what their vision is for activating that space, because that is really in the heart of East Central. So council will play a role in bringing that together.
And maybe there's an opportunity to use that thought exchange as well with that neighborhood to help get some.
Absolutely. Love that technology for feedback.
That's perfect. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Not seeing any. Awesome. I believe that concludes our agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order to discuss? Not seeing. Oh, Councilman Wilkerson.
Councilmember Cathcart, on our next meeting, could we have some type of update on our priority strategy 2 on repurposing public property and assets to stimulate? We've been getting some inquiries about land that the city owns, those ghost houses, zombie houses. So I think it'd be important for us with our housing initiatives to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, personally. Councilwoman Stratton?
I would just say when we schedule that, I would make sure that we get Matt Folsom, who's been really heavy in that work, make sure that he's available for a presentation.
Perfect. We will try to make sure he's available for that then. Thank you. Anything else? Not seeing it. All right. Well, we will adjourn and see everybody at 3:30 for briefing and legislative.